Before I begin this formal presentation of my research and its findings, I wish to briefly articulate three foundational convictions that informed the intellectual architecture of this work. These are not rhetorical statements. They are what I call first principles that shaped the inquiry itself. Number one, first, we are called to be thinkers, not merely reflectors of other people's thoughts. Scholarship advances through disciplined original engagement, not repetition. Second, this is drawn from educational psychology and developmental philosophy. It is wiser to prepare individuals for the path than to prepare the path for the individual. In volatile environments, resilience outperforms protection and capacity outlasts circumstance. Third, every individual without exception possesses the inherent capacity to learn, to relearn, to unlearn, and to explore. The constraint is rarely potential. It is structure, it is sequences, and it is psychological readiness. These convictions are not conclusions of the research. They are the convictions that compelled it. Now, to the focus of this paper. This paper introduces the R.U.L.E framework, Relearn, Unlearn, Learn, Explore, a sequenced cyclical model designed to operationalize continuous transformation in what scholars increasingly describe as a BANI environment, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible systems. We are now operating in what many scholars describe as a post-VUCA environment, not just volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, but increasingly defined as BANI, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. Yet even BANI may prove temporary as a descriptor. The pace of systemic change suggests that while classifications will inevitably emerge, the deeper issue is not the acronym itself, but the accelerating instability it attempts to name. Before positioning R.U.L.E as a contemporary contribution, it is important to acknowledge that foundational models of learning and human development were profoundly instructive for their time and context. Let's think about it. Bloom's taxonomy provided structured cognitive progression suited to an industrial era mastery. Maslow illuminated motivational dynamics within relatively stable social systems. Kolb formalized experiential reflection. Alvin Toffler anticipated that literacy in the 21st century would require the capacity to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, these frameworks were not flawed. They were optimized for ecological conditions in which they emerged. And that's important to remember. However, that context has changed. The half-life of professional knowledge is shrinking. Artificial intelligence recalibrates industries within months or even days. Economic, technological, geopolitical disruptions compound simultaneously rather than sequentially. Linear cause and effect reasoning frequently collapses under non-linear acceleration. Now, frameworks designed for progressive accumulation struggle in such volatility. Adding knowledge without restructuring cognition produces fragility rather than adaptability. Now, the central research problem addressed in this paper is therefore this: how do we design a structured framework that prepares individuals and institutions not merely to adapt to change, but to proactively remake themselves in environments of accelerated disruption? Now, R.U.L.E emerges from nearly a decade of applied implementation across schools, universities, corporate training environments, families, leadership programs, and cross-cultural contexts. It synthesizes insights from cognitive psychology, transformative learning, systems thinking, neuroscience, particularly the recognition that learning is inseparable from emotional architecture. The first phase, relearn, addresses a blind spot in the conventional design. Every learner arrives with prior knowledge and embedded assumptions. Rather than treating this as background context, R.U.L.E foregrounds it through structured reflection, prior knowledge inventories, and facilitated dialogue. Learners map what they believe to be true. Now, this phase functions diagnostically, surfacing cognitive conditioning before new instruction believes. The second phase, unlearn, is the most demanding, drawing on research in cognitive inhibition and dissonance theory. This phase involves the deliberate identification and release of outdated assumptions, beliefs, and habitual responses. Now, unlearning is not erasure, it is loosening rigidity to permit accommodation as articulated in developmental theory. Without this step, new information is filtered through unexamined frameworks, limiting transformation. The third phase, learn, proceeds on now cleared cognitive ground. Instructional methodologies like seminars, simulations, AI-assisted instruction, mentorship, all these operate with greater depth and transferability because learners are not simultaneously defending prior assumptions. Learning becomes reconstructive rather than merely additive. Competency is demonstrated through measurable application. Now, the fourth phase, explore, distinguishes R.U.L.E from most existing models. Exploration moves beyond application into generative territory. Learners conduct independent research, they initiate innovation projects, and they produce original contribution. This phase aligns closely with doctoral scholarship and innovation-driven professional context, where creation, not replication, defines excellence. R.U.L.E is cyclical. Exploration surfaces new questions and gaps, feeding back into relearn and initiating another revolution of growth. This design transforms the framework from a program into a lifelong methodology. The intellectual architecture integrates Toffler's accelerated change thesis, Dewey's experiential philosophy, Senger's systems thinking, Piaget's assimilation and accommodation, and even Carol Dweck's growth mindset research. Its original contribution lies in the sequencing these insights into a structured, accessible cycle that integrates what is commonly known as the inner curriculum, the belief systems, identity narratives, and the emotional patterns that determine how learning is encoded. Now, implementation guidelines provide phase-specific assessment strategies and scalable application across educational, leadership, and organizational contexts. Applications between 2017 and 2026 demonstrate measurable improvements in critical thinking, adaptability, engagement, and authentic adoption of change initiatives. In conclusion, R.U.L.E does not reject previous scholarship, it extends it. When environments evolve, adaptive frameworks must evolve accordingly. By insisting that individuals relearn before they unlearn, learn on cognitively cleared ground, and explore beyond formal instruction, R.U.L.E offers a dynamic and relevant methodology for transformative growth in a world that no longer moves in straight lines. In a BANI era, the capacity to cycle deliberately through relearn, unlearn, learn, and explore is not optional. It is strategic necessity. My name is Paul Charles, and I teach people how to relearn, unlearn, learn, and explore. I teach people how to rule.